and the guests and the department, the staff that are present today. Let me welcome everyone. Please accept my apology if in the protocol of greetings I happen to leave your name. You are equally important like any other person who is part of this meeting. But having said so, we are meeting as the joint committees today to deal with the proposed private members bill. I think in the initial meeting we did give the background of where we come from, and therefore we felt that as a portfolio committee on mineral resources and energy, we needed to get a sense of what also is the view, as also there was a request, what would be the views of the portfolio committee on public enterprise as well as the department, as this is a matter that, yes, by policy might fall on mineral resources and energy, but in terms of its impact, it will have a direct impact on what public enterprise is dealing with. So that is the main reason we are here, and therefore before we could deliberate as the portfolio committee of mineral resources and energy, we had to confer with our colleagues in public enterprise. And so that is basically what is about today. In the last meeting we had, we think there was a hiccup that we couldn't get the presentation from the department as well of public enterprise and Eskom. And I see today we are well and good on course. Now, let me also give the chairperson of public enterprise to also make all of his own welcoming remarks, and then we'll go to look at apologies and then deal with the presentation. Honorable Makat.
Thank you so much, Honorable Chairperson Luzipho. I think I'm also want to take this opportunity to welcome everybody, our members from the Portfolio Committee for Public Enterprise. You already actually articulated what brings us today together here is to do with the Independent Electricity Management Operator Bill, what is called IMO Bill. Also, it's a continuation of the previous session. Therefore, I think by now, the people who are supposed to make presentation are ready, Honorable Chairperson. Therefore, I think we all welcome, and I will have to give back to you. Honorable Chairperson. Chairperson. Chairperson.
I'm listening.
Yeah, I think I've done with the welcome, and you're supposed to continue the session.
Yes. Are there any apologies?
Yes, Chair.
Let me start with mineral resources.
Good morning, members and our guest. Apologies, I've got a problem with my camera. I'm Ayanda Boss. I've got 3 apologies from Mineral Resources. Ms. Hlonyane is not coming to the meeting, and Ms. Mgweba. Mr. Zungula will join us after 10. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Is there any from public enterprise? Apologies.
Good morning, honorable members and chairperson. No apologies from public enterprise that I've received formally. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. My first apology is so that no one will make another apology. Please, Our experience sometimes is not good. I'm apologizing on behalf of those who are going to make the same thing so that it's done in advance. Please make it a point that when you are in social meeting, switch off mic and switch off your camera so that we don't see things that are happening in the background, which may not be good for public viewing. Please, let's apply maximum discipline. You only unmute your mic when you are going to be making a point. We have seen certain things that are not good for our eyes in public. I just saw something even now. So please, I request anyone and everyone who's here, let's stick to the rules. Make it a point where you are ready for a meeting. It must be seen that you are coming, you are taking the work that you are doing very seriously. That's my plea. So that sometimes we hear kids in the background and everything. We know not all of us, we don't have big houses. In as much as it is the case, let's try and find a very quiet place that will make it a point that the work that we do is not only respected by us, it's also respected by the public at large, whom we are anyway tasked due to their mandate. That is just a request, but also a rule that we'll all have to comply with. So I've apologized for those who are going to make this mistake because they are going to stick to the rules. They will not do that. Having said so, I saw the Minister for Public Enterprise. I hope I'm correct. I think he's gonna lead us on public enterprise. Is the MRE present? The MRE, are you present? I take it that the MRE is not here. I just see an apology now, honorable members from Honorable Nimalo is saying that he's struggling with connecting to the. I'm sure finally IT will attend to that. Having said so, let me give you to the Honorable Minister and his team, Honorable Pravin Pradhan. Welcome, Honorable Minister. The floor is yours.
Good morning, chairpersons and honorable members, and those members of the public that are joining your committee. Thank you very much for this opportunity to make this presentation on this proposed bill from the Democratic Alliance. I want to confirm what you've said, Chair, that this is a policy matter which lies in the domain of mineral resources and energy, and that we are merely expressing a point of view to assist you in understanding our perspective on this policy issue. And secondly, if I may apologize up front, I need to leave at 10:45 for another meeting at 11, which I can't miss. So I hope you would accommodate me in that regard. But I'm sure we can conclude this matter in the next hour and a half or so with the cooperation of everyone concerned. There is a presentation that we have prepared. There was one distributed earlier on, and there's a slightly amended one that was distributed late last night, early this morning. But we will flight it and take you very quickly through the presentation. I'm just wondering which of the officials on my side are going to help me in this regard. But while they're working that out, Chair, the presentation covers four aspects. Firstly, the structure of the electricity supply industry in South Africa, and just to give some idea to colleagues and members on some of the issues that pertain to this matter, both in this country and globally as well, and what the global trends are. Secondly, we look at the bill itself. We're not going to cover every aspect of the bill, but certainly a few of the principles that emerge, and we will make some comments on that. Thirdly, we will show that in the roadmap for the restructuring of Eskom, many of the issues that have arisen in this paper, in the proposed bill, are in fact catered for in that particular regard, and other developments that would occur as well in the electricity supply industry. And finally, make some concluding remarks. So slide number 3 looks at some of the questions that arise in the restructuring of the industry. If somebody who's managing the slides can go to slide mode, that will help. So I'm at slide number 3. So some of the questions, chairpersons and honorable members, is how do we get a diversification of electricity supply? So remember that we are talking about 3 sets of issues here. Firstly, the generation of electricity and how that is done and the extent of diversity we have. Secondly, the transmission of electricity and the operation and ownership of the transmission grid, which most countries in the world regard as a strategic asset, not to be privatized in any kind of way. And thirdly, the distribution of electricity, which again takes different forms in different countries. And we have our own unique history, but also current dynamics in that regard, where both Eskom and municipalities take responsibility for the distribution of electricity. So diversification of supply could mean both the generation side, but also the distribution side. The key issue for us in South Africa, as many have raised, both in government and outside of government, is the question of energy security. And energy security will certainly depend upon a careful but rapid and effective implementation of the integrated resource plan in all its respects, so that electricity supply and availability is ahead of the economic cycles that any country's economy will go through, and that electricity does not act as a constraint to economic growth, which it has in our situation done over the last 10 or 12 years. So the ambition that government would have through the integrated resource plan and its implementation, and currently through Eskom, but through different forms of generation as well, which is already occurring, is to ensure adequate supply and security of that supply of electricity to our country, both to citizens and to businesses. The third issue is competition, which would ensure that the right level of pricing occurs, and that efficient pricing would mean a competitive advantage for businesses and a lower cost of living for citizens. Question that arises from all of this is who pays for generation infrastructure. Currently, much of that comes from the state through Eskom, but there's a diversity that's developing in our country through embedded generation, through the various bid windows and actual implementation of renewables as well, in which there's largely private sector investment, and to the completion of the Eskom major projects in Kusile and Medupi. But as we look into the next 5 or 10 years and beyond, the funding of infrastructure would look pretty different from what we actually have today, one would anticipate. Creating industries that support electricity provision should be a key objective in terms of the industrialization objectives that we would have within the country. And clearly, electricity supply must contribute to inclusion and equity amongst the citizens of this country as an important objective. question that arises from this proposed bill is why a private company should own the transmission component of the electricity supply value chain, and we'll address that issue in a moment. I want slides 5 and 6 are for your information largely. The first, slide 5, is the structure of the electricity supply industry in South Africa. And you can see the three different components of the value chain: generation, transmission, including systems operation, and distribution. So there's some disturbance coming through here, person.
I hear that if it's not you, Honorable Minister, then somebody has unmuted his or her mic. Please, if that person can use, so that's what I was pleading for. Can that person switch off the mic, please?
Okay, I'll just proceed, Chair. Slide 6 looks at what the International Energy Agency provides to us as global trends in relation to energy security, talking about promoting diversity, affordability, and reliability being key elements of any energy supply system, and the restructuring of vertically integrated state-owned monopolies, Eskom being one, and the Eskom roadmap is addressing that, and that process is underway, as we indicate later in the slide presentation. Ensuring economic development. In this regard, they talk about free markets to foster economic growth, but that's the perspective they come from. And what they talk about here is a new policy trajectory and the numbers of people that are getting access to electricity over time. We've had our own electrification program in this country, and whilst excellent work has been done, there's still the last leg to travel in that particular regard. And an important component that we have to consider much more seriously and give effect to is the environmental questions that arise from the current modes of generating electricity and future modes of generating electricity in relation to environmental protection and the use of various types of fuels versus the use of renewable resources such as the sun and wind and other resources where they are applicable. This talks about the current realities globally on the African continent and within South Africa itself. And again, this is to provide some context for the discussion that we are having, so I won't go through the details. It's for your edification. This is an example of the global restructuring that seems to be occurring elsewhere in the world. Again, in relation to the single buyer model, which is what ISMO and EMO attempt to actually address. Competition in relation to generation, which we are beginning to have in South Africa, both within Eskom itself, but more importantly, through embedded generation and IPPs and other forms of generation as well, and retail competition that they see elsewhere in the world, which in our context requires a fair amount of careful consideration. So on the bill itself, in that context, Chairperson and Chairpersons and honorable members, the question still remains, what is this bill actually addressing? So there are three, let me remind ourselves, key components: generation, transmission, together with the systems operator, and distribution. And in part, the bill's objectives or objects set out in section 2 of the bill seems to say that the object is to set up a financially viable EMO, as it is called, which will act as a trader of electricity, will prepare appropriate input into the planning of electricity supply, which I'm sure is a highly contentious matter. And in subparagraph D, under 2, says is responsible for the establishment, practice, and maintenance of the integrated power system. What the word practice means in that context is a bit of a mystery. And what an integrated power system, which is supposed to be generation, transmission, and distribution, has to do with the transmission component, which this bill is supposed to be addressing, which is what slide 10 picks up on, is a fundamental contradiction that this bill presents. In any event, as far as the Section 3 of the Act is concerned, when looking at 3.1c, there's a provision in the bill which says that states shall not be allowed to be a shareholder of EMO. And that's quite a categorical statement. So in essence, it is saying that what most countries in the world consider to be the key strategic asset in any electricity supply system, i.e. the transmission component and the systems operator, is what should be privatized in South Africa. And the rest of the bill addresses various aspects of it, largely addressing itself through reference to the Companies Act itself. So some indications given that this is premised on the ISMO bill, but I think the ISMO bill takes a very different tack in terms of the precise role of an inverted commas ISMO and the ownership of ISMO itself. And in any event, you will find that in the Eskom roadmap, we address these questions as we go forward. That is the separation of transmission from the rest of the components, i.e. generation and distribution, as we go forward. Now, as you will see later in the slide presentation, Eskom has already undertaken some of these changes through the implementation of the Eskom roadmap. And we are on the way, so to speak, to actually establishing an independent transmission component. And as we go forward, the Minister of Minerals and Energy, in this instance, the energy component, through government will determine what the future shape of Eskom will be and how transmission fits into this picture and who will be the buying authority, what different types of generation of energy would be permitted in terms of the integrated resource plan and any successor to that plan, and of course how distribution of energy or electricity will take place in South Africa. So if we then look at some components of the bill in slide 11, and again, Chair, I won't go through all of them. I've pointed out the fundamental contradiction that we have that government will not find acceptable, and that is the private ownership of a key component and a strategic component in relation to transmission. In this slide, we talk about here the EMO concept talking about open up electricity generation, but that is already something provided for in the integrated resource plan and in other policy initiatives that the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy has already taken over the last year approximately, and where further initiatives will be taken in this regard as well. It says give IPPs the opportunity to have it as Eskom. That's already happening, and as we evolve along this path, further initiatives will be taken to give effect to this as well. Transfer the risk of power plant construction and operation to IPPs. Well, currently the IPP model transfers a fair amount of risk to government itself in terms of the provision of guarantees and so on. And I think future generations or bid windows must actually be framed differently so that there's appropriate levels of risk sharing. This is something that we've discussed with some multilateral banks in the last week or so, and we find that we're quite accurate in picking this up as an important issue to look at. Provide for independent dispatch of generators. And again, as the system evolves beyond the current situation we actually have, all of these things will come into shape. So on the right-hand side, chairpersons and honorable members, we indicate where there's a direct relationship between some elements of the proposed bill and the Eskom roadmap in relation to, in the first instance, as I've pointed out repeatedly, the separation of generation, transmission, and distribution. In the second instance, into the formation of the transmission entity. In the third instance, the consideration to create 2 or more generation subsidiaries. That's just as far as Eskom is concerned, but also allowing for private sector participation in generation through the various pronouncements that the Minister of Energy has made. And Eskom itself should be given the option, if it has the resources, to participate in the renewable sector. On slide 12, we go into the key component that we find as a problem, for which reason we would say that this bill should be rejected by the 2 committees. And that is incorporation, as I mentioned in section 3(1)(c) of the bill, of EMO as a private company. So I won't go into the details. Safe to say that this is a matter of principle, which is something that is consistent with international patterns and trends. And what we can talk about at some stage is how investment could be permitted into that particular entity, because it would be one of the most or the more profitable parts of the overall electricity system that we would actually have. But that's something in the future once the restructuring actually occurs. On slide 13, again, we look at the private sector or the private company being established. It says that the EMO will not be an SOE, but it is also not, so to speak, an ordinary private company, because on the one hand, we want no state involvement. On the other hand, we want the Minister of Energy to nominate a board or 5 members of a board, sign the memorandum of incorporation. We don't want the PFMA to apply in this bill, and so on. So there's a series of contradictions that the bill itself reflects, and confusion conceptually in terms of what is actually intended and what actually emerges. Perhaps the key issue here is allowing, and this has been the objective as far as this political party is concerned, metropolitan municipalities to purchase electricity directly from generators, i.e. IPPs, in certain circumstances. And here again, it's not our business to comment on that. But the Department of Energy has invited comments in this particular regard in terms of the electricity regulations on the new generation capacity, which you see on the right-hand side of the slide, in order to allow for municipalities that have the financial standing to be able to engage in this process to actually do so. So there's a process underway which would be completed shortly once the regulatory consultations have actually been completed, and that objective will be served without necessarily having to pass this bill. Now we get into various chapters of the bill. And again, Chair, as I've said, in principle, I've addressed the key issues, but chapter 1 is about ready. Chapter 2 is about the establishment and functions, particularly section 6 of the bill. And these are some of the details that are relevant in this particular regard. And again, I don't think there's any need to go into the details, save that throughout this chapter, and particularly in section 6, which runs for about 2 pages, you have a fair amount of conceptual confusion between just the transmission component itself versus what is then called the integrated electricity system. And so that's where our key comments are. For your information, this is what we talked about more than a year ago in relation to the restructuring of Eskom. And you can see at the lower end of the slide that it provides for the separation of transmission, which is TE, from both generation and distribution. This is another representation of the transmission component and the market operator, with generation on the left-hand side. And you can see the diversity of sources of generation and types of generation. And on the right-hand side, the distribution component as far as municipalities and so on are concerned. It's the next slide. I'm at slide 20. Now at slide 21. These are some of the benefits that we've shared with the committee before in relation to the restructuring of Eskom, which by and large has been welcomed by all sections of industry and society. And it adds, as we say, greater transparency in relation to costs and transparency and supervision of operations or effectiveness of operations. And once the whole system begins to operate effectively, contributes to economic growth in the country by providing energy security and a secure supply, ensures competition, particularly in generation, so that the cheapest prices are available to South Africans, both as citizens and as businesses. It provides a stable system overall as soon as these processes settle down. And over time, it will promote innovation and entrepreneurship as well as different players, as is already happening within the renewable sector, come to the party in this particular regard. What is the progress in terms of the so-called unbundling or restructuring process? These are some dates, Chair, and the Eskom management and board has been asked to speed up some of these processes, which they will do. And there already is a divisionalization of generation, transmission, and distribution, the so-called divisional or internal boards that have been appointed earlier this year. And now the details of, for example, financial accounting, IT systems, etc., are the details that are being worked upon at the present point in time. And perhaps later in the year, we could give you a fuller report in this particular regard. And finally, on slide 24, we are basically saying that both the intention of the Department of Energy in relation to the ISMO bill and the Eskom roadmap, as I've just gone through in outline, give us the same result as this bill, but the transmission component remains in the hands of the state as an important and strategic asset, whilst on the generation side, there's a diversity of generation that has already started, and more of that diversity will emerge as we go forward. And on the distribution side, as you know, municipalities earn a fair amount of their revenue from electricity tariffs and adding a premium on the price that currently Eskom sells electricity to municipalities. So once we begin to look at the distribution area and the role of municipalities and rationalizing that role in some way, the fiscal elements at a municipal level will have to be looked at carefully by the various government components and other role players as well, including local government. Therefore, in quite emphatic and clear terms, we would not encourage any support for this bill, as it is superfluous. It does not do anything innovative. It is slightly confused, we believe, conceptually in its crafting, and the same purposes can in fact be served by ongoing processes that government has already put in place. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, for the presentation. Honorable members, let me again just caution members. We are all adults here, and if there's someone who came in by mistake, he's in the wrong place. When we say let's switch off, our mics, let's switch off our videos, I don't think we should repeat it again when we're dealing with adults. So please, don't disrupt or disturb the meeting. I again repeat, because we can't say when we are sitting in a meeting, some bodies, you can hear this walking, whether the floor is making noise, and many things that are happening at the background. Please, let's respect the meeting, all of us. Having said so, thank you, Minister. Sally, I usually do things differently from my committee. I don't know from yours, but I would request that let's take the first three from mineral resources, and the first three, and I know how I do it in my committee, so I can't prescribe for you. But I think because we are two committees, very big when you are two, it actually means we are supposed to be close to 22, or sometimes we might be even more than 22. So let's be fair with time. The maximum I'll give my members, they know, my committee members, they know no one will exceed 3 minutes. Ask questions of clarity, or if the member feels wants to comment, just comment. I have my watch with me. I know how I do it. Then I will give to the chairperson of public enterprise to deal with the first three members, but also they should not exceed 3 minutes. And then we'll go back to the minister. You will take notes, Minister, of the questions. Unfortunately, we'll try and avoid a dialogue where one person asks a question and then you respond. So you'll bear with us, with your team. You'll take notes of the questions or comments that are being made. I will start with Mr. Mashale.
Chair.
Yes.
Yes, I want to disagree with you.
Yes.
I'm sitting in the Portfolio Committee of Public Enterprise, and we're seeing this bill is coming to this committee for the first time. So if you're going to give us 3 minutes, like you're giving to your own committee members, which are seated with this bill, they've been sitting with this bill, they've been interrogating it and going through it for some time, that is not fair on our part. We're seeing this for the first time and we would like to engage on it. So please don't limit public enterprise to 3 minutes.
Okay, let me leave with public enterprise. I was not saying public enterprise won't speak. I was saying we'll give the first three, so that out of all these members, I'm calculating the time, and the minister has made a request to be released at 10:45. But I can't rule. It's not my committee, public enterprise. I leave it with the chairperson. Let me do the way I was doing. But I'm sure members are also seeing the response of the department for the first time. But let me leave it as such. I leave it to the chairperson of public enterprise.
Chair. Okay, Chair.
Yes.
Can I suggest another process? Instead of you taking responsibility of the three, of the mineral and resource, and then I take three, just take the whole responsibility of question and answering. Just chair for everybody, and then you use your own flexibility to everybody. And then I will just after you have finished, and then we, in an attempt to close.
Let me give you then to deal with it, because I would know all of the members, and then the staff will help us on the hands that are being raised.
Oh, you suggest that I must take the
Yeah,
responsibility.
take this session.
Okay. Yes. Can I get the hands who's helping me to get whose hands are up?
Chair, could I just interject here to say that on my screen there's no facility here for me to raise a hand.
Okay.
No, it's registered me as a guest here. Maybe that's why.
Okay. Let me then say 3 first names from the mineral and resource, mineral energy, first 3 hands. Can I get number 1 there?
The names that I suggest is Honorable Mahlaule, Honorable Mailem, and then Honorable Mchenjani.
Thank you. Can the honorable members come accordingly?
No, thank you very much, Chair. Both chairpersons, and let's welcome the presentation from the Minister. It is confirming some of the issues that in the mineral resource and energy portfolio we have been saying, that if we were to give a chance to IEMO without the process of restructuring as it is happening, we would be going ahead of our time, and in the name of privatization is not in the good interest of the country. So the minister has just confirmed our long-held view that we should give the restructuring process a chance, even before we go back to ISMO, because that would be the process that we would embark on before we even consider the views of IEMO. So Chair, there's really nothing much from ourselves. We have been debating this bill for some time. We're just happy that some of the things that we have been saying are confirmed by the Minister of Public Enterprises. So we will hear other views, especially from the Portfolio Committee of Enterprises specifically, so that when we go and engage, we take consideration of those views. There is no confusion on where we're going. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Mahlaule. Can you get a second member?
Thank you, Chairperson. Can you hear me?
Can hear
Thank
you.
you, Chairperson. I've been doing a lot of research into various structures of transmission system operators around the world. And there's general agreement internationally that the functions of planning, allocation, procurement, and system operations should be extracted from the generation utility. There's also a broad sense of thinking that the buyer function should also be extracted from the generation facility. And this is something I'd really welcome Minister Gordhan's input on. In this regard, there are more than 30 countries that have created their own separate transmission system operators. And I'd like to quote what the World Bank says about transmission system operators. It says, a TSO must be independent of the ownership and control of market participants, for example, generators, distributors, and suppliers. And independence is required so that the TSO does not discriminate in favor of one market participant over another. The World Bank goes on to say that functional unbundling, or the idea that a large power enterprise owns both generation and transmission and then tries to establish detailed conduct rules so that the grid operator will act as if it is separate when it is not, is the impossible dream and cannot be reconciled. Government ownership is not a long-term solution, that government ownership and control continues the very problems that the reform was supposed to have solved. So this brings me to some questions for the Minister. First of all, Minister, you're a former Minister of Finance, and you and I have had a long relationship. We know each other quite well. Does the Reserve Bank model work in South Africa? And if so, why would it not work in this particular case? Minister, the second question is, although you put up a timeline of Eskom's unbundling, the reality is there's been little real practical progress on Eskom unbundling. How can that generate competition? How can that do exactly what the World Bank says it cannot? Then, Minister, I'd like to bring your attention to a slide where you say that the allocation of a specific function to metropolitan municipalities is unconstitutional. My question is, did you get a legal opinion in this regard? And are you aware of Section 1553 of the Constitution, which says that national legislation must prescribe the different functions of Category A and Category C municipalities? Lastly, on your slide, you say the solution must result in energy security for South Africa. And in this regard, I absolutely agree with you. However, the Department of Public Enterprises and Eskom have shown that they are absolutely incapable of ensuring energy security. So, is it not time, Minister, for an alternative solution?
So much, Honorable Milam. Can we get a third person?
Yes, thank you very much, both the chairpersons, and also thanks for the presentation today here. But the point there is that, as the first speaker said, the Honorable Mika, we have said it loud and clear as we are seeing this bill for the second time, some of us here in this committee. Yeah, as it used to come into our committee. We said it loud and clear that we cannot be seeming like reversing apartheid issues here. Because by allowing this bill, it simply means that we are rendering Eskom useless, as it is useless as of now. But we know that Eskom itself is not useless. The only thing, the management of Eskom, they are the one who are useless. But the entity itself, it's not. Because it can be correct that during apartheid, Eskom was doing very well. But now that it's democracy, then it can't do well anymore. It's not correct. So we are saying we cannot allow this IMO bill for that reasons. And also, we got points of why are we saying that? Because as you hear that they say that they want to give the immunity to have the same access to electricity market as Eskom. That is rendering Eskom useless. And Eskom, by the way, it's not supposed to be making money. Eskom supposed to produce. In fact, we are calling for Eskom to have more capacity, to can produce more electricity for its people. As we speak now, there are more people who still don't have electricity. Now, this IMO bill is addressing issues of metro municipalities and all those things. What about there in the rural areas where it's so poor? Poor people still today that they don't still have electricity as we speak now. So in other words, we are denying them forever. Because if we allow these such bills to exist, bills from the DAs, we will understand that we are reversing apartheid in disguise, because this is exactly what's happening. In other words, those rich people will be the only one who will be able to buy electricity. The poor people there in the rural areas will never be able to buy electricity. So we cannot allow such a thing. We are rejecting this thing. We are saying instead Eskom must build its own capacity to can produce more electricity, renewable energies, and everything, so that our people can have access. But finally, Chairperson, you can hear from the minister here that he himself is dilly-dallying, he's not sure what he's talking about. No wonder why Eskom is failing like this. So we are calling for Eskom to come back to Department of Mineral Resources. So, because remember, Eskom is an energy, and we are having an energy department in this Department of Mineral Resources and Energy. So we are calling for Eskom to come back to Mineral Resources and Energy so that it can be managed properly.
then we're calling for that minister there to go somewhere else, because it shows that even himself, he was failing. He failed to manage Eskom, but there were other people who were fired for that, which are Mabuza and them, but he's still here. He's rendering Eskom useless as per se. He is still with his friends discussing this issue. It looks like, yes, it can work and all those things. We know what they are trying to do here. We cannot allow this thing as a committee to happen. Thank you very much, Chairpersons.
Thank you, Honorable Tenjani. Can we go to the portfolio committee members of the public enterprise? Number one.
Sorry, Chair, we've got Honorable Matwe and Honorable Kumete.
Okay, Honorable
And Chabalala.
Kumete, Honorable Matwe, Honorable Chabalala, Honorable
Kachalia.
Honorable Chabalala.
Sorry,
My hand was also up, Chair, Honorable Mkhwanazi.
I put my hand up in my earlier conversation with you.
I will get you next. Now it's going to be Chabalala, followed by Mwaotwe, and then Kumede.
Thank
Okay,
you
let's
so
go.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. Let me greet honorable members in the House and really welcome the department's presentation on this, and greet the department as well, led by the Minister. Look, the introduction of a private members bill entitled Independent Electricity Management Operator Bill, commonly known as EMO, in the National Assembly by the Honorable Manzoni will be analyzed really for what it is. And I'm happy the fact that it's our first time as the public enterprise would deal with this paper. But however, I want to say, Chairperson, the DA in its own economic and technical thinking limitations to solve any problem in South Africa, if this is seriously considered, and really we must consider the consequences thereof of what the DA wants to do, of commercializing a viability of Eskom as well for the future supply of the electricity in South Africa. This bill in essence seeks to privatize of electricity generation, supply, transmission and distribution to a private sector company to the exclusion of government as a shareholder. Now, that's something that we need to highlight, that the DA wants to privatize and take it out of the hands of government, of which from the ANC point of view, that is not the policy of the ANC as a governing party. And to further say, although the principal emphasis of the bill is on supply and transmission for obvious myopic reasons to be detailed in the paper, its conclusion are geared towards the dismembering of Eskom and leaving government at the same time to carry out the honors of servicing the 450 billion debt liability. Now, the intention and position of the bill and what it seeks to create, Chairperson, for what it is this, that the section of the paper, or rather the bill itself, seeks to highlight the main propositions contained in the bill, which will be analyzed in terms of its state intention and consequences thereof, as well as whether that is in the national economic interest of South Africa. Furthermore, this will serve as the basis for a comparison with the ISMO bill, which it claims is merely reproduced in the bill. The objective of this bill, Chairperson, is defined as to provide for the establishment of an independent electricity management operator as a public-private partnership entity, which will provide an independent system operation to ensure safe, secure, and efficient operation of the integrated power system and trading of electricity at wholesale level, and to allow metropolitan municipalities to purchase electricity directly from independent power producers and to provide the matters connected therewith. The public-private partnership entity proposed is unique as it defines no financial benefit to government in such a partnership. The object of this act is to legally provide the incorporation of EMO as a private company. Thus, the public-private partnership disappears in the object of the act. Therefore, the act sets out 6 objectives of the private sector company, which is proposed as EMO. I won't go further, Chairperson. Chairperson, safe to say as the ANC, we are rejecting this bill with the contempt it deserves. We will not support this bill that seeks to privatize Eskom. And furthermore, we make laws on the basis of us trying to deal with the imbalances of the past. And therefore, if you remember, when the ANC took over, the godfather of distribution, Ian McRae, may his soul rest in peace, when Mandela took over, he asked Mandela that, what is it that you're going to do with Eskom? And Mandela answered him to say he will not do anything as long as they continue to connect the cheap electricity grid and connect our African people. So in this instance, the marginalized. Therefore, the ANC is doing something about it. And what we are saying is that we are commending what the department is doing. We're showing confidence. We wanted to continue to restructure the Eskom. The turnaround strategy must continue, Minister, as soon as possible. When we observe the distribution as we're doing right now, we need as this committee to sit down and ensure that we move with the department as it moves, trying to deal with the issues of maintenance and the challenges that we're having today. However, this DA that seeks to come here and come to Parliament, utilizing this platform to make sure that they want to privatize and take over these assets from the marginalized community, from our own people, we shall not allow it. And as this public enterprise, and I want to move as the ANC, and I want to say it so that I'm quoted properly, that we will reject this bill, and we're rejecting it, and we shall meet you in the House in support of the Minerals and Energy Portfolio Committee. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Maodwe.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. We reject this bill from the EFF. That must be understood from the onset. I won't even waste my time going through this bill because I'll be glorifying something that doesn't really need the glory. What I want to address now to the Minister of Public Enterprise on what should happen. So I want to lobby the minister to say we need stability in this country. We need energy supply. I saw that in one of your slides, you spoke about the energy security. We need such stability in the energy supply through pursuing mixed energy sources like your safe coal, your nuclear energy, and your renewable energy sources. And then secondly, Minister, you need to get Eskom to have a massive renewable energy division, which will make optimal use of solar, wind, and hydro energy sources, while the dependable energy base will remain safe coal and nuclear energy. And thirdly, Minister, I know that, and the ANC likes to do this when they campaign, that are going to give free electricity. I have not seen any household being given free electricity. So I'm challenging you through Eskom, give poor people electricity at least up to 200 kilowatts per month. And then the fourth thing is, Minister, you need to take a bold step and cancel all the contracts with independent power producers. That will stop the rollout of new independent power producers, because the opportunism of the DA is through those independent power producers that they are now coming with such bills. But if we were to take a bold step and stop those independent power producers, you will not have this opportunism that the DA wants to do. Now, the other thing is, Chair, we need an independent minister. We need to build an institute, a research institute, an independent state electricity economic research institute to prioritize research on energy infrastructure planning, which will form part of your portfolio. It must fall under public enterprise. It must not go to CSIR. It must fall here, and it must guide it must give the direction to this country in terms of energy distribution, transmission, and generation. And then, Minister, you need to have a strategy on how we're going to deal with illegal connections. We find this many times in informal settlements. Our people need electricity. Let's not treat our people as if they're foreigners in their own country. Let's have a campaign to really deal with illegal connections. Let's make them legal. Let's have a strategy from Eskom to go and put electricity in all the informal settlements. And Minister, the last one is we need to invest heavily in renewable energy sources, including windmills, solar water heaters, and all forms of renewable energy to ensure a good mix of sources of energy. And we need to drive to have a campaign on energy savings from households to big corporations to mining companies and all that. That will make Eskom to stop this load shedding that our people now have to face with. And lastly, Minister, we need a state-owned mining company that mines coal, which will then be supplied to Eskom at no cost, because it will take off the burden of these mining companies now charging Eskom exorbitant prices for supplying the coal that they take from our own land. Chair, I will stop there for now. Those are the challenges that I'm posing to the minister, and I'm hoping that we can really, Minister, if we can prioritize those things and action them, it will take us a long way. But this bill really doesn't deserve our interrogation. We reject it. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Mawatwe. Honorable Kumede.
Chair. Hi, Chair.
Hello, you are audible, Honorable.
Yes. Am I allowed to cede my rights to Honorable Mkhwanazi?
Okay, that's fine. Honorable Mkhwanazi, come in then. Thank you, Honorable Kumede. Honorable Mkhwanazi. Honorable Mkhwanazi.
Thank you, Chair. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible now.
Thank you so much, Chair. I want to support my honorable, thank you, chairpersons, board chairpersons. Thank you, the minister. Thank Minister for the clarification.